Hello, everyone, or maybe I should say anyone. Welcome to the Thought Crime Workshop. It's great to have you here with me. At the Thought Crime Workshop, we're always trying to find fairness and equality, and we think that if it's okay for them to mess with our minds, then surely it's only fair for us to mess with theirs. So, maybe it went down like this. Hey, Bubbles, I need some good song ideas for the new album. And you know what I think would be great? I could write a song about a woman being violently murdered by an intruder in her own home. Nah, I doubt it. The song Smooth Criminal is one of the best known and widely adored songs that Michael Jackson gave to us. But it has always been a little confusing to me, and probably to many people. When you look at it in simple terms, it quite clearly implies a criminal has entered Annie's home with the intent to do harm. I was thinking about this song recently, and a particular thought arrived which made me curious as to what the song actually means. So I started to dig into it. And so the first thing I need to do is entertain the possibility that this song is not simply about a woman being butchered in her own home. What I believe that is that he's trying to communicate a message about something, and that both Annie and the criminal are just metaphors, and the violent crime described is also a metaphor. Writers and artists love to think in metaphors and analogies and similes. The thing about speaking in metaphors or any abstract terms, whilst communicating about important ideas, is that it's very easy for the meaning to be lost or misunderstood. And even worse is that a bad faith actor can easily use language to misdirect and deceive an audience when communicating an important idea. Some examples of linguistic misdirection that we're all familiar with are statements and comments made by politicians and business executives, which always fail to answer the question. But linguistic misdirection has now pervaded through all of our society, and even our interpersonal communication with friends and family are rife with misunderstandings. A lot of the time, the misunderstandings are completely innocent and based more in poor choice of words or concepts due to a limited understanding of definitions. But other times, it's is with a malicious intent, or at least with an intent to benefit socially or financially from a deception. So, what I want to demonstrate here is that whatever the topic might be, it is very easy to misdirect people and hide meaning by using language in a clever way. I'm going to take a closer look at Michael Jackson's Smooth Criminal, and while we do, please remember that the point of this study is to demonstrate that it does not matter whether my interpretation of the meaning is right or wrong. It serves to entertain the realms of possibility and keeping an open mind. Here's my take on this classic piece of art. You may or may not be aware of the urban hypothesis that surrounds the identity of Annie in the song. Well, the theory goes that all resuscitation training dolls are referred to as Anne, as this was the name given to the first one. And now the first step of CPR at that time was to establish unresponsiveness in the patient. So trainees were required to ask the doll if they were okay. So it became common to use the doll's name, "Are you okay, Annie?" I've not been able to find a quote from Michael Jackson confirming that this is correct. The closest evidence I could find is a statement by film director Spike Lee claiming that this was Michael's intention. Although there appears to be no firm evidence that this is the case, it does fit too neatly into the song to be a coincidence, in my opinion. So, if we work based on this CPR doll theory, it immediately creates the interesting question about how a CPR doll is being murdered in her home. And what could that be trying to say? So immediately we can see that the song is not as straightforward in meaning as it appears to be. Annie can easily be switched to Annie, A-N-Y, and perhaps that was the intention of the doll's original creator also. And the definition of anyone is easy. It's a generalized reference word for any person who isn't specifically identified. But there is something else about Resus Annie that we have not considered in assessing the identity of Annie the victim. Resus Annie is a doll, a mannequin, or a dummy. And Annie is a replica of a human, but obviously has no awareness or consciousness. It is a human form that has no ability to move independently and can only be moved around by real people. And the only reason people move the mannequins is to put them in convenient locations to serve a purpose or to be stored out of the way when not required. So that gives me an identity for Annie. Annie is a metaphor for a person who is unaware. Excuse me. She's a representation of all the humans who are unaware of what is happening around them. And so now we need to try and identify who the criminal is. And that's going to be a bit more difficult, but like any criminal, it has left behind some clues which might help us discover the identity. The song opens with the criminal coming in through the window with the sound of a crescendo, and the word crescendo is defined as either the climax of a gradually increasing sound or the gradually increasing sound itself. And obviously, being a musical term, Michael Jackson would have had a firm understanding of the meaning of that word. I'm going to use that straightforward, gradually increasing meaning. So then it begs the question, what kind of criminal enters your home in a gradually increasing fashion? Michael explains that the criminal came in through a window. This deserves consideration. The normal process to enter somebody's private domain is through the front door, and we know that criminals often use a window to gain entry as it is the weakest point in the structure. Rather than focus on the obvious meanings here, let's consider what a window represents in philosophical and physical terms. A window is a transparent barrier which, in the absence of a curtain, allows an outsider to see directly into a private area, but the ability to see through the window is directly relative to the balance of light inside and outside of the structure. At night, when it's dark outside and light inside, the person inside the house is unable to effectively see out through the window and will only see their own reflection. Whereas the person outside can see perfectly into the structure. And the reverse case is true in the daylight. When it is brighter outside, you cannot see clearly into the structure, but you can see out perfectly from the inside. When the balance of light and dark is evenly distributed, both perspectives can now see clearly through the window. A window is a great analogy for truth. It suggests an equal transparency when the balance of light and dark is achieved. Transparency is a great analogy for honesty, as it means that nothing is hidden. There is no deceit taking place. The truth, therefore, is simply an absence of deceit. When the distribution of honesty is not balanced, we're unable to see each other's positions equally. The criminal enters the apartment and leaves bloodstains on the carpet. Okay, that's odd because he hasn't gotten to Annie yet or even attacked her. And so that happens in the bedroom later on. There is immediately a chronological inconsistency here. So, for my interpretation, I'm going to assume that this criminal already has blood on his hands or feet, and therefore suggesting the criminal had recently finished committing a crime elsewhere. Another way of describing this might be that the criminal is dripping in blood. Next up, Annie tries to hide under the table. It would be fine to leave it as literal, but that's no fun. So how about we interpret that he meant Annie was exposed and had no protection? You can see the parallels here with the use of windows, which also indicate an exposure to view. Then we have the line where the criminal, he could see she was unable. And I like the idea of leaving this one literal in that the criminal knows that she's unable to hide from the attack. Then she ran into the bedroom. She was struck down. Okay, so forgetting the literal description of her action here, of running to the bedroom to escape, when you consider what a bedroom is, you can try to then find some alternate meanings for the bedroom. What it is it's the most private room inside of a private domain. So I think here I'll assume he meant that she has lost her privacy to the intruder. It was her doom. This closing statement for the verse seems to be self-explanatory. However, the exact definition for doom varies slightly depending on intention. It generally implies a forecast of a life-threatening danger. You don't tend to have doom cast on you or inflicted upon you. It's a concept that means something is on course for a bad ending. It also is used to mark the point at which a bad end becomes inevitable, such as in the phrase, closing in to seal your doom. It has not occurred yet, but it is certain to occur. And so now it becomes very unclear if Annie died in this attack. In fact, this line likely implies that Annie is not dead, despite the blood mentioned, but Annie is certainly doomed to a bad end at this point. The chorus refrain is a repeat of Annie, are you okay? And it's interlaced with repeats of the verse lines. And there's one new line added in there, which is there's a sign at the window that he struck you, a crescendo, Annie. Okay, this one has me stumped a little bit, but I believe that he's clarifying the message that I interpreted in the opening lines by saying that Annie was struck by crescendo, a gradually rising intensity, or attacked after a gradually increasing intention to attack. The sign at the window reference could be a reference to Annie calling for help by placing a sign in the window. This would then logically imply that she's trapped in the house by the criminal and can only signal for help. But then that would also imply that she's aware she's trapped, which doesn't fit with the narrative I'm outlining. So I can discard that idea. It could mean that when viewing the house from outside, an observer can see that Annie is being attacked, like an example of a symbology uh, that people can see. But another further possible meaning here is that the sign in the window is a reference to a transaction. A for sale sign or a help wanted, for example, placed in a window is common for a retailer or seller to do. I like this last retail interpretation best, and it fits the narrative well by implying that Annie is for sale or that she's somehow involved in a transaction. So then comes the second verse, which is more ambiguous in my opinion, and it seems to notably change direction to forget about Annie altogether. And the perspective switches around a lot here. It feels like he was cramming in a few concepts that he wanted to include but couldn't form them into a coherent storyline like in the first verse. Okay, so they came into the outway. A lot of possible meanings here, but it won't change the overall picture too much. Firstly, I ask, well, who is they? He's very specifically said a smooth criminal in the chorus, which means one person. So perhaps he's now referring to either a group of criminals or maybe a group of detectives hunting for the criminal. Again, the criminal is likely to be a metaphor, which could refer to a group or an individual. So I think he's referring to a group of people as being the criminals. Next is to explain the outweigh word. Firstly, the major dictionaries do not identify this as a conjoined word of out and way, and my spell checker, and he spells it W-A-Y, and my spell checker doesn't like it, so he's made this word up here. And then the literal meaning of each word individually is just basically exit way or exit passageway. But this could also be a clever misdirection for the intended meaning of the same verbal sound. The same verbal sound is outweigh, W-E-I-G-H. If you type in outweigh with a Y into Google, you will see that even the search algorithm there has learned it's a common misdirection and corrects it for you by showing you mostly results related to W-E-I-G-H. And this word, outweigh, means to have greater value or mass or to exceed in importance or influence. I think this line could mean they came in through having greater influence. It was Sunday, what a black day. I'm undecided if this one has any alternate meaning, but it is interesting that he chose to use Sunday out of the 7 available days. And why even bother referring to a specific day at all? I like the idea that the Sunday represents light or positivity and the black day refers to the dark or negativity. Again, we can see a link to the window reference in the balance of light and dark affecting your vision. Okay. Every time I tried to find him, there were no clues there behind him, and they end up never knowing who's the suspect or what to expect. I'll look at these four lines as a group because these are additional lines from the movie version which do not appear in the Bad album recording. They don't really change anything in regards to the groove of the song, and when recording his Bad album, he would have had sufficient room to have these four lines in the album. Even if recording space was limited, he could have shortened up any of the other tracks with long fade outs by that length, and it would have made no difference to the quality of the album overall, in my opinion. And regarding the Moonwalker movie version, the movie making process is similarly challenged to fit content into a finite space. So, by him adding it into a movie run time, it suggests that he felt it sufficiently important to add to the song. And I would imagine it was not an issue of practicality or recording space, and therefore hypothesized that these lines were added after the album recording to bolster his message. If you look at these four lines, you can see the perspective of the narrator changes from line to line, but they all amount to variations on essentially the same meaning, and that is that even if people are trying to find the criminal, they have no idea or no clue of where to look. The line "they're behind him" implies that the criminal is in front of the people who are searching. And if you reverse the perspective of that line, it comes out as he's in front of them. The "who's the suspect" or "what to expect" line strongly implies that people are unaware of who is committing the crime, and that they do not know what type of crime it will be. As you can see, the narrational and temporal perspective moves around a lot as he tries to add more meaning into the song. Mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. In this line, we have a convincing indication that the Resus Annie legend is likely to be true. It's an interesting line. In the literal sense here, mouth to mouth could simply refer to the act of passing breath to another person, or it could also refer to another mouth to mouth process, verbal communication. The passing of family and tribal knowledge through the ages was handed down from mouth to mouth with the intention of giving your descendants the benefit of your ancestors' wisdom. Resuscitation is used as the term for bringing back someone from unconsciousness or near death, but it's also used in artistic study to refer to the revival of a long lost or abandoned style of expression. So, really, the true definition of resuscitation is just to make something active or vigorous again. Sounding heartbeats, intimidation. Sounding has a few definitions, which is slightly different, but the modern use of the word is as a noun, and it means to take measurements of depth or distance in water or air. And heartbeat, of course, is literally the rhythmic pulse of life. To intimidate is defined as to create fear in or overwhelm somebody, especially regarding coercing somebody into doing something that you want them to do. What I get from this last line is that a measuring or analysis of people's lives is taking place, and that this information is being used to coerce people into taking certain actions, or perhaps thinking in certain ways that the transgressor would like you to, or them to. Okay, so with it all broken down now, I can reassemble the song as a translation, and it goes like, "The criminal enters people's homes in a gradually increasing fashion. The criminal already has blood on his hands from recent or ongoing attacks it has made. People try to hide, or they believe they can hide from the criminal, but the criminal knows they cannot hide. There's no private place we can hide from the criminal. We will be affected by the criminal, and it will be our doom. Is everybody okay? The sign in the window indicates that you're selling yourself in a gradually increasing way. The criminal comes from a direction that you were not expecting, and it is able to attack by using its unequal share of influence. The balance of truth has been disturbed. The criminal is in plain sight, but we're not aware of the tactics being used against us or who the criminal actually is. We have lost our connection with what was meaningful in life, and we need to revive it. The criminal is studying us and taking measurements and using the information to create fear-driven responses and actions." So this is what I think Michael was trying to say in this song. I believe he wrote this song and a few others after becoming aware of the corporatization of the world and the use of psychological manipulation by large corporations to sell people products which they do not need. The goal, of course, being to create a disposable consumer culture and thereby support an economy of perpetual growth. These tactics, which involve the glorification of individualism and the manipulation of emotional decision making, were pioneered by Sigmund Freud, but greatly refined by his sister Anna Freud Bernays and her son Edward Bernays. It also is apparent that the government and the media now also use similar psychological and emotional manipulations to control the population and influence our decision making processes. If you believe in conspiracy theories or not, it is undeniable that Bernays worked toward helping business and government control populations by targeting individualism and physical and emotional security needs. He did this by essentially using our instinctual reptilian brain responses against us to coerce certain actions and behaviors and steer the population in the direction that corporate entities and government desire. And if you don't like these kind of conspiratorial theories, well, then at least the analysis serves as a great demonstration of how easy it is to take certain words and phrases and extract from, or more importantly, impart alternate meanings onto them. It's very easy for a malicious agent to deliberately confuse a message or misdirect people's attention by using language in a certain way. To arrive at this interpretation, I didn't have to stray far from the source diction itself, I just investigated it on a more than superficial level. And as the alternate meanings started to reveal themselves, they started to tumble out more freely. And it felt like I'd unlocked the thought process, and the song now made a lot more sense to me. So, that's pretty interesting. Now, regardless of what your opinions are in regarding Michael Jackson, it's a bit of a hot button topic. It's evident that this guy created some of the best art the world's ever seen. It'd be foolish to deny his creative genius, and after going through this song, I'm certainly convinced that he was also an intellectual genius. But, guys, what this all comes down to is we need to come together. The divisions in society are becoming dangerous, and these partisan politics weren't meant to be like this. All we're down to now is factions trying to seize power instead of sharing the burden of the power. We are the most powerful species on this planet, and we should be working together to share that load, that burden. The idea was that each school of politics of thought was to be separated through a window, and that we sought compromise by communicating and negotiating through a window. And each room has an equal amount of light or honesty, because that's the only way you're going to be able to see each other clearly. Well, thanks for joining me in the workshop. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you'd like to get more of this content, hit subscribe and the notification bell. If you'd like to leave a small donation, it would be greatly valued, and it's going to help me produce more content and better quality content. My PayPal is in the description below. That's all I got set up at the moment. So yeah, guys, once again, thanks for watching. That's all for now. Stay safe out there. I'll see you again soon.